Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. Always delighted to have my good friend on. This guy is just an extraordinary attorney, I love visiting with him because not only is he an attorney, he is a individual who understands what's happening on the political front, the policy front, and he's kind of a great social commentator, and that's Lee Kaplan. And he is with skv.com, which is Spicer, Kaplan, and Veselka, the law firm. And Lee, good to talk to you, buddy. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine.
All right, let's start real quick by talking about your law firm. I always like to give the listener an opportunity to learn more about it. Let's start with that, and then we've got some interesting topics I think are very timely, not only locally but internationally. So let's start with your firm, though.
Well, our law firm basically handles civil litigation, commercial lawsuits, and white-collar criminal matters and internal investigations. Frequently, companies find that there's a question about whether there's been some wrongdoing, and they generally hire lawyers who are not their regular counsel because they think their regular counsel could potentially have a conflict or a relationship with an individual who might be under some cloud of suspicion. And so we often are hired for internal investigations or special investigations for a company as to whether or not there are some issues there.
Okay, very good.
That's what we've been doing. The most notable things we've had this year are we've been involved in some First Amendment issues as to whether lawsuits improperly infringe on someone's First Amendment rights. And we've been, frankly, victorious on both sides of that in two different cases with separate types of facts. We represent one of the Deepwater Horizon defendants against whom the government has steadily dropped the claims that it's making, and that's scheduled for trial in Louisiana early next year. And we have some arbitration matters, and I had a trade secrets case in May, which we tried on behalf of the plaintiff and got a $12 million verdict and judgment. So different kinds of cases.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And that's part of why you enjoy what you do so much, I think.
Right. I learn about different industries and businesses, some of which I already knew about somewhat, and others of which are totally new. My most recent trial was for a company involved in what's called high-frequency trading, and I learned a lot about algorithms for trading. This is something I knew nothing about in the past.
Yep. So, that's interesting. Well, let's talk a little bit about what I think is probably the single biggest news story of this month, at least, which is the attacks in Paris. And really what accompanies that issue is the refugee crisis that's been ongoing. And for those who are interested, if you put in Kevin Price and ISIS in the Google search, you'll see I wrote an article in May predicting exactly what happened in Paris. It just made sense. When you looked at the fact that the coyotes, if you will, the people who were exporting them from the Middle East and Africa to Europe, the boats that were being used, the majority of those boats apparently are owned by ISIS. What a surprise that they would insert their own people in those situations. So anyone who is surprised by what happened just isn't looking at things through common sense. And so, and at least two people they are pointing at were people that were refugees. And so no surprise there. But the refugee crisis continues, and the United States has to look at its long-term history as a compassionate nation when it comes to these kind of things and in national security. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this, Lee.
Well, this got even more exciting because some people are suggesting that we either put Muslims on watch lists or we only let in Christian refugees. The truth is, we generally let people in who are victims of religious persecution. And I had two comments about this. Number one, there are Muslims who are being persecuted because they're not crazy Muslims,
right,
like or alleged Muslims like the ISIS people. So plenty of Muslims are being persecuted. And second, how would you know if someone wants to infiltrate the United States and they claim they're Christian? How would you know? I guess you can check on whether they've gone to services for a while, but services secretly in Syria. I think that our normal vetting process is what we're going to have to rely on, and it's pretty strict, and it lets out only a teaspoonful of of refugees into the United States when many apply. And so there's just a lot of heat, not much light being shed on this controversy right now. And I think that both sides are at fault. For the Democrats to act like there's some unfair religious test, well, there's always been a religious test, which is persecution. I understand we're letting in the Yazidis because they're being persecuted for their religion, and I expect we'll let in more people who are being persecuted for their religion, many of whom will be Muslims.
Yeah.
So sooner or later, someone will slip through, regardless of whether we let in refugees.
Oh, yeah,
that'll happen at the Canadian border, the Mexican border, or somebody will just get put ashore in a raft somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. So, who knows what's going to happen.
No question about it. No question about it. And there's enough third world poverty south of the United States border to pay someone who's not even Muslim to do it, to be, to be a lottery ticket for their family. So then that doesn't mean to be cynical. That doesn't mean, that we give up, being diligent, but it also is a kind of a healthy real world reality.
I think Americans really don't realize just how fortunate we've been up to now, and that's a tribute in part to our physical distance and having two oceans between ourselves and most of the true jihadist terrorists, but also I believe there are lots of intelligence agencies working on this and law enforcement, and it's things that the average citizen knows nothing about. But our money must have been spent well, because we really have had nothing happen since 2001, and that's very, very surprising.
Yeah, at least nothing that beyond the homegrown things like Boston.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's pretty impressive, and I don't know that any president can take credit for that. During that time, obviously, we've had a Republican president and a Democratic president, but fortunately the people who work on this seem to be nonpartisan. They're just doing their job and protecting American citizens.
Yep, absolutely. So kind of give us an idea of what this, what the review process looks like.
Well, I don't know too much about it, but I understand it lasts 12 to 18 months. And so presumably there are a lot of background checks where our law enforcement or intelligence agencies cooperate and reach back into the home country of the person who's come here to find out as much as they can about them. And we've been doing that all along. We let in refugees each year from very troubled areas of the world, and obviously we haven't had a problem yet. I mean, for example, if you're in a big city such as Chicago or New York, and sometimes Houston, you often have a cab driver who is a an alien, somebody who came from places that are very troubled, like Somalia or Ethiopia. And there are plenty of homegrown terrorists in those countries, and yet, people manage to make it to the United States after a lengthy period of time. They are able to get a green card, and they're able to work and live here. So I don't know exactly what they do, but they must be doing a pretty thorough job of it.
Yeah.
So
very few actually get here. Very, very few. I saw the numbers. I think Chuck Todd talked about it on over the weekend on his show Meet the Press. And so is it Meet the Press or Face the Nation? I get those all confused. But anyway, he was talking about it. Yes, Meet the Press. It isn't very many. And the United States has got a history of being a humanitarian country. I struggle with it, and everything has to be done sensibly, and you got to figure out how to maintain American values and that type of thing as well. But, I kind of gravitate towards trying to figure out a way that allows us to help some in a reasonable manner, which is what we've already been doing.
Let me just say, if you ever go to a naturalization ceremony, you get a lump in your throat.
Yeah.
Because you see people who have come from all over the world, countries that start with A all the way to countries that start with Z. And these are people who want to be in the United States, who want to go through all the roadblocks and obstacles and delays and everything else to become American citizens. It's very, very humbling and impressive.
Yeah, I believe that. And
there are people like that around the world for whom we are still a city on a hill.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah, before I wrap it up about the segment, some final thoughts in terms of the business front, other stories you're looking at that will be future topics when we get you on next month?
There's one case that's pretty interesting. This has been bubbling around for about 2 or 3 years. It goes, and the Texas Supreme Court decided something in 2014, and I think they finally refused rehearing. But this is a case between Zachary Construction and the Port of Houston. And the contract said that Zachary could not get any damages for delay, essentially, regardless of what happened. And the Texas Supreme Court has decided that you cannot exclude damages that are caused by your own fault. In other words, in this case, the port, it was alleged by its misconduct or its intentional fault, caused more damages to Zachary, caused a change in the plans. Zachary protested that, went ahead and did the work, and then sued for delay damages, and the port said, no, the releases that are in the contract preclude that. And the Texas Supreme Court has made it clear that that freedom of contract has some limits, and the limits are you cannot, by your own intentional misconduct at least, exclude future damages. So that's kind of a big deal, because now what it really means is anybody can allege that you deliberately caused the delays, and they can get around the contract. Mm-hmm. The states are divided on this, and Texas now falls down on the side of people who say, well, if you can show intentional wrongdoing that caused those damages, then the other party can in fact recover, and the clause that tries to exclude that's unenforceable.
Lee Kaplan, he's with Spicer, Kaplan, and Veselka. That's skv.com. As always, good talking to you. Look forward to talking to you again soon, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Great job. All right, when we come back, more for you. Do want to remind you, best content here shows up over there at usdailyreview.com. And this is The Price of Business.